3:02 a.m., April 8, 2026, Knoxville, Tennessee. 14 ATF vehicles idled on a commercial access road behind the Riverside Distribution Center, headlights off, engines at minimum throttle. Inside the lead vehicle, Special Agent Marcus Delaney checked the timestamp on his radio. In exactly 4 minutes, the same sequence would begin at 13 other locations across 6 states. The air smelled like cold coffee and gun oil. Nobody spoke. Estimated total seizure target, 2 million counterfeit M30 tablets. Estimated street value, $67 million. The tablets were pressed to look identical to legitimate 30 milligram oxycodone. Same blue color, same imprint, same size and weight. But every one contained fentanyl, a dose calibrated not for effect, but for volume. The network behind them had been running for over 18 months, threading supply lines through 4 retail storefronts, a franchise auto detailing operation, and a logistics chain stretching from Phoenix to the Carolina coast. 28 people were about to be arrested simultaneously. The operation had a name: Pressed. What agents didn't know yet was that one of the targets had already moved. Delaney had been in Knoxville for 11 weeks. He'd watched the Riverside facility from a rented commercial van, 2 surveillance agents rotating shifts, logging every delivery driver, every license plate, every pattern break. The building was registered to a vape supply distributor called Clearline Holdings, LLC. On paper, Clearline was a wholesale intermediary. It sourced atomizer coils, e-liquid concentrate, and heat seal packaging machines for 4 retail vape stores operating under the brand Vapor Ridge, spread across Knoxville, Atlanta, Columbia, and Charlotte. The retail operation was functional. That was what made it unusual. Most distribution fronts maintained thin cover, minimal inventory, few real customers, paper-thin revenue. Vapor Ridge didn't operate that way. The stores ran actual retail. They stocked product, ran promotions, processed returns. Combined monthly revenue across all 4 locations averaged $187,000. The Charlotte store alone had a 4, 2-star Google rating, and over 200 organic reviews. The federal investigation that would eventually dismantle Clearline didn't begin in Tennessee. It began in a DEA laboratory in Atlanta in December 2025, with a comparison no one expected to matter. A forensic chemist named Dr. Priya Nair had been cataloging overdose samples from 4 jurisdictions: Raleigh, Greenville, Knoxville, and Savannah, as part of a routine multi-state fentanyl tracking effort. The tablets were M30 counterfeits, standard profile, consistent with hundreds of samples the lab had processed in the previous 12 months. But Nair noticed something in the dye impression data that didn't fit. Pill press machines leave tool marks, microscopic striations in the punch face that transfer to every tablet the machine produces. They're as individual as fingerprints. The samples from all 4 cities showed the same dye signature, not a similar one, the same one. That meant a single press, or a matched set of presses, was supplying overdose tablets to at least 4 cities across 3 states simultaneously. Nair flagged the match and sent the dye signature to ATF's National Center for Explosives Training and Research, which maintains a cross-reference database of commercial pill press imports. ATF matched the dye pattern to a customs entry logged at Charlotte Douglas International Airport in March 2024. 1 consignment, 1 shipping manifest, 1 registered importer, a holding company called Blue Ridge Industrial Supplies, LLC, incorporated in Delaware, registered agent address in Wilmington. Blue Ridge traced to a single purchase order. The purchase order traced to a fulfillment address in Knoxville. The fulfillment address resolved to a commercial mail receiving service. The registered lessee of that mail service box, Clearline Holdings, LLC. 4 analysts, 2 agencies, 9 days, to connect a set of dye marks to a Knoxville vape distributor. The real work was just beginning. The joint DEA/ATF task force, Operation Pressed, stood up formally in January 2026. Delaney was named lead agent. The task force had one immediate problem. Everything they had was circumstantial. Dye signature matches could be challenged in court. Customs data established a purchase, not a crime. They needed to follow the supply chain in both directions. Backward to the fentanyl source, forward to the distribution network. Backward was harder. The task force spent the first 3 weeks of January trying to establish how Clearline was acquiring raw material. Acetylfentanyl, the variant appearing in the tablet samples, is not produced domestically in meaningful quantities. Virtually all of it enters the country from overseas chemical suppliers, frequently routed through intermediary brokers in Mexico or Canada. Tracing a specific source requires either a controlled delivery or a cooperating witness. They didn't have either. What they had was a financial thread. Clearline Holdings had filed 3 years of tax returns showing modest revenue from wholesale distribution. The company's bank account at a regional Tennessee institution showed regular deposits consistent with those returns. But Delaney's team identified a secondary account, a business checking account opened at a different institution under a DBA registered by one of Clearline's principals, that showed a different pattern entirely. Deposits came in irregular tranches, $43,000 one week, $91,000 the next, then nothing for 3 weeks, then $127,000 in 2 days. Outgoing wires went to 3 destinations: a Phoenix-based LLC called Sonoran Chemical Logistics, a logistics company in Nogales, Arizona, and a cryptocurrency exchange registered in the Cayman Islands. Sonoran Chemical Logistics had been on DEA's radar since 2023. It was suspected of brokering bulk precursor chemicals sourced from 2 Chinese suppliers, not a manufacturer, a middleman, a layer of insulation between the overseas source and the domestic buyer. The task force had the supply chain sketch. They needed it proven. What they needed was someone on the inside. Going through the surveillance logs from those 11 weeks in Knoxville, one name kept appearing in the delivery manifests that didn't fit the pattern of the other drivers. A courier the task force would come to call Subject 12. He drove a series of short-term rental cars, never the same model twice, and made stops at all 4 Vapor Ridge locations on a rotating schedule. He never entered through the front of the stores, always the back. Subject 12's real name was Derek Alvin Pruitt, 31, formerly employed as a logistics coordinator for a regional trucking company in eastern Tennessee. He'd been working for Clearline since mid-2024, paid in cash, using a series of burner phones to coordinate with the store managers. The task force identified him in late January through rental car records and cell tower data that placed the same device near multiple Vapor Ridge back entrances on delivery days. On February 4, 2026, Pruitt agreed to cooperate. The circumstances were unremarkable. Pruitt had been stopped by local law enforcement on an unrelated traffic matter and was found in possession of a quantity of counterfeit M30S consistent with personal distribution. Facing a mandatory minimum, he agreed to a proffer session. What he described over the next 7 hours restructured the task force's understanding of the operation's actual scope. The proffer session ran from 9:17 a.m. to 4:44 p.m. in a conference room at the DEA's Knoxville resident office. Delaney sat across from Pruitt for the entirety of it. A prosecutor from the Eastern District of Tennessee sat to Delaney's left. Pruitt's court-appointed attorney had been replaced by a retained defense attorney who arrived 90 minutes late and spent the first 20 minutes reviewing the cooperation framework before nodding to Pruitt that he could proceed. By the time Pruitt finished talking, agents had filled 14 pages of handwritten notes and opened 3 new investigative threads that hadn't existed that morning. The 4 Vapor Ridge stores were not fronts in the traditional sense. They were functional retail because legitimacy was the point. The stores maintained enough real business activity to explain cash flow, justify commercial leases, and provide cover for the backroom equipment. Each location had a dedicated storage area, separated from the retail floor by standard shelving units that could be moved, housing 1 or 2 hydraulic pill presses with interchangeable die sets, heat seal packaging machines, and stock of blank pharmaceutical-grade binding agents. The pressing operation ran 3 days per week at each location, rotating schedules to reduce vehicle traffic patterns. Raw fentanyl powder arrived in shipments disguised as wholesale e-liquid concentrate, the same packaging format the stores legitimately received from their actual vape suppliers. The counterfeit concentrate containers were sorted during receiving, moved to the back room, and processed into tablets within 48 hours of arrival. Output, Pruitt estimated, ran between 900,000 and 1 million tablets per week across all 4 locations. Total monthly production, approximately 2 million tablets. The tablets moved out of the stores through a courier network of 8 drivers, all using rental vehicles, all paid in cash, all making runs to distribution points in college town markets. Chattanooga, Athens, Spartanburg, Chapel Hill, Johnson City, Boone. The college town focus was deliberate. Counterfeit M30S sold fastest in markets with high rates of recreational opioid use and limited street familiarity with pharmaceutical product testing. Pruitt gave the task force 3 supplier names in Phoenix. He gave them the contact protocol for Sonoran Chemical Logistics. And he gave them something they hadn't expected, the money laundering layer. Revenue from tablet sales, collected in cash by the courier network, dropped at predetermined pickup points, and aggregated by a manager-level contact identified as Subject 7, was being laundered through a Chattanooga auto detailing franchise called Precision Detail Group. Precision Detail had 4 locations across Tennessee and northern Georgia. It was a real business. It performed real detailing services. But it also processed a volume of cash transactions that couldn't be explained by any reasonable estimate of detailing revenue. The task force ran a parallel financial investigation throughout February and March. Precision Detail's bank deposits, cross-referenced against its reported service volume, showed a revenue gap of approximately $2, $1 million per month. That gap represented laundered tablet proceeds, moved through the business's cash intake, cleaned against inflated service invoices and fabricated customer records, and then distributed upward through the network's financial layer. Here's what this tells us about how serious domestic drug distribution actually works in 2026. The retail front, the courier network, the money layer, these aren't separate silos. They're integrated, designed by people who have studied prior prosecutions and engineered around the pressure points. The Clearline network wasn't sophisticated in the way that word usually gets used. It was methodical. There's a difference. What's most surprising about this case isn't the scale. 2 million tablets a month is enormous, but the DEA has seen comparable volumes before. What's surprising is that the retail cover worked as intended for 18 months. 4 real stores, 4 real leases, 4 sets of employees with real payroll. The operational cost of maintaining legitimacy was built into the business model. That's not intuition. That's planning. On February 19th, the task force established a controlled surveillance posture on all 4 Vapor Ridge locations, both sets of Clearline's bank accounts, and the 3 Phoenix-based supplier contacts Pruitt had identified. They placed a wire on 2 phone lines associated with the primary Clearline principal, a 44-year-old Knoxville resident named Carter William Foss, who held the registered agent position for both Clearline Holdings and Blue Ridge Industrial Supplies. Foss ran the operation from an unremarkable commercial property leased under a third entity in the Bearden neighborhood of Knoxville. He communicated with store managers through a signal-based protocol, rotating account names on a schedule derived from a shared calendar he distributed physically. Printed pages, no digital copy. He communicated with the Phoenix suppliers through a separate protocol using a dedicated device that never connected to domestic cell networks, routed instead through a VoIP service based in Latvia. The wire produced almost nothing useful in the first 3 weeks. Foss's voice discipline was meticulous. He spoke in references and partial phrases. Dollar amounts were described in terms of units, without stated denominations. Shipment quantities used a rotating substitution code Pruitt helped the task force partially decode. The obstacle was the VoIP protocol. The Latvia-based service was outside U.S. jurisdiction and declined to cooperate with a mutual legal assistance request. For 22 days in February and March, the task force's view of the Phoenix supplier chain was essentially blind. The break came from a direction no one had planned for. One of the Phoenix supplier contacts, identified in task force records as Subject 3, a 48-year-old naturalized U.S. citizen operating Sonoran Chemical Logistics out of a commercial warehouse in the Maryvale district of Phoenix, made a domestic phone call on March 3, 2026, not through the VoIP protocol, through a standard cellular line to a contact in Tucson. The call was brief, but it established Subject 3's U.S. phone number, his location, and a partial reference to a scheduled shipment dated March 11th. ATF's Phoenix field office placed Subject 3 under physical surveillance the same afternoon. 2 agents in a commercial delivery vehicle parked across from the Maryvale warehouse entrance, logged his movements for the next 6 days. Subject 3 kept irregular hours, arrived at the warehouse between 5 and 7 a.m. most mornings, and received 3 separate freight deliveries during the surveillance window. He used a personal vehicle, a late-model pickup truck registered to a relative, and drove a consistent route between the warehouse, a residential address in Glendale, and a cash-only check cashing service on West Indian School Road, where he made withdrawals 3 times in 6 days. None of that was directly incriminating, but it built a pattern consistent with someone managing active logistics for an ongoing distribution operation. The March 11th shipment arrived at a Phoenix freight consolidation facility in 3 pallets, declared on customs documents as industrial cleaning compound. ATF coordinated with CBP to allow the shipment through under controlled conditions, a supervised release tracked by GPS tags embedded in the outer packaging. The shipment moved from the Phoenix facility to a Tucson transit point, then north on I-17 to a Flagstaff distribution warehouse, where it was broken down and repalletized. From Flagstaff, 2 subshipments moved east, one to Albuquerque, one toward Amarillo, Texas, and then northeast along I-40 toward the Tennessee distribution chain. The GPS tags were discovered at the Flagstaff warehouse. Someone ran a radio frequency sweep of the incoming pallets, a counter-surveillance measure the task force had not anticipated. The shipment stopped moving. Delaney's team had 47 minutes from the moment the tags went silent to decide whether to execute on available evidence or hold for a stronger evidentiary position. Executing early meant arrests but weaker charges on the supplier tier. Holding meant risking evidence, destruction, and possible flight. The decision went up to the task force's DEA coordinator. She authorized a middle option: activate surveillance on all domestic targets, allow the Phoenix tier subjects to remain in place for 72 hours to prevent alerting the network, and accelerate the domestic operation timeline by 10 days. Operation Prest was originally scheduled for April 18th. It moved to April 8th. Unpopular opinion: the 10-day compression almost broke the case. 3 of the 14 raid packages were finalized with incomplete floor plan verification. One target building in Columbia, South Carolina, had undergone internal renovation since the original property records were pulled, and the room layout agents expected didn't match what they found. Nobody was hurt, but the operational risk was real, and it was accepted under pressure. Whether that was the right call depends on what you think the alternative cost would have been if the network had been tipped off in those extra 10 days. Put yourself in the lead agent's position at 11 p.m. on April 7th, 12 hours before the operation begins, reviewing 14 raid packages knowing 3 of them are working from outdated floor plans. What do you do? In the final days before the operation, the task force's evidence processing team worked through the night at a staging facility outside Knoxville to catalog and photograph every piece of documented material collected over the preceding 11 weeks. Surveillance photographs. Financial records subpoenaed from 3 separate banking institutions. Rental car records from 7 national agencies cross-referenced against cell tower logs. Pruitt's proffer transcript, already designated as protected cooperation material. The evidence room was organized chronologically along one wall and by subject along the other, so any agent walking in could orient themselves within 60 seconds. That organizational discipline, the kind that never makes it into court documents but drives everything about how a prosecution holds together under cross-examination, was the work of a single evidence coordinator, a 12-year DEA veteran who had processed materials from 4 prior large-scale opioid prosecutions. She flagged 2 discrepancies in the financial records that prosecutors had not noticed. Both were corrected before the indictment was filed. On the night of April 7th, Delaney held a final coordination call with all 14 raid package leads. The call ran 41 minutes. Each package confirmed target presence. Surveillance teams at every location had visual or signal confirmation that primary subjects were at or near the target addresses. The Columbia package disclosed the floor plan discrepancy. The task force adjusted entry flow for that location. 2 additional agents assigned to secondary containment positions. Breach team reduced to maintain maneuverability in unknown room configurations. At 2:58 a.m., all 14 packages reported ready. At 3:02 a.m., the signal went out. The Knoxville breach was textbook. Delaney's team hit the Riverside facility's 2 entry points simultaneously, front-loading dock and rear service door, with a 14-agent stack. The facility's overnight staff consisted of 2 individuals, neither armed, both detained within 90 seconds of entry. The backroom press operation was running. 2 hydraulic presses were mid-cycle. Agents documented 640 tablets in the output tray before securing the room. In Atlanta, the Vapor Ridge location on Buford Highway was breached at 3:03 a.m. by a 12-agent DEA/ATF team. The store manager. Subject 9 in task force records, a 32-year-old Athens resident named Terrence Hobbs, attempted to access a rear exit and was detained at the door. Inside, 1 operational press, heat seal packaging equipment, and approximately 14,000 tablets in various stages of finishing. In Charlotte, the Vapor Ridge location near Beatty's Ford Road presented the most complex entry. The building had shared wall construction with an adjacent occupied residence. The breach team staged for 8 minutes past the coordinated start time, waiting for a secondary surveillance unit to confirm the adjacent unit's occupants were not in proximity to the shared wall. Entry came at 3:11 a.m. The press equipment at this location was more extensive than any other site. 3 hydraulic units, a full die set in 12 configurations, and a temperature-controlled storage area housing approximately 60 kilograms of acetyl fentanyl powder. That single find at the Charlotte location changed the seizure math. 60 kilograms of acetyl fentanyl at average press efficiency represented between 2, 8, and 3. 1 million additional tablets that had not yet been manufactured. In Colombia, the floor plan discrepancy proved significant. The interior configuration placed a secondary room, not on the original plans, between the main retail floor and the back press area. That room contained a floor safe. The safe was not opened during the initial breach. It required a separate warrant authorization and a cutting crew, which arrived at the location at 6:47 a.m. Inside the safe, $880,000 in vacuum-sealed currency, bundled in denominations consistent with cash drug proceeds, and a shipping label from a UPS account registered to a Clearline subsidiary, destination address, a commercial receiving facility in Miami, Florida. The UPS shipment had been scheduled for pickup on April 9th. It had missed the network's last operating day by 1. Across all 14 locations, the simultaneous operations ran between 41 minutes and 2 hours and 9 minutes, depending on site complexity. 28 individuals were taken into federal custody. 6 pill presses were seized and destroyed on site. Agents documented 2 million tablets across all locations, consistent with Pruitt's production estimates. 6 vehicles were seized as proceeds. The Precision Detail franchise accounts, targeted by a separate financial warrant package executed in coordination with IRS criminal investigation, showed $2, 7 million in cryptocurrency holdings distributed across 4 wallet addresses. All 4 wallets were frozen within 2 hours of the arrest warrants executing. One detail stayed with me after going through the financial records from Precision Detail. There's a line item in the franchise's December 2025 intake records, a cash deposit coded as Fleet Service Commercial Account, totaling $341,000 in a single week from a single payee. The payee reference code doesn't resolve to any real business entity in the IRS database. Whoever set up that laundering layer wasn't improvising. They built a cleaning mechanism that had been processing revenue for at least 14 months before anyone looked at it. The Phoenix supplier tier arrests went simultaneously. Subject 3. Carter Foss's primary supplier contact at Sonoran Chemical Logistics was taken into custody at his Maryvale warehouse at 1:02 a.m. Pacific Time, consistent with the 3:02 a.m. Central Coordinated Start. 2 additional Phoenix subjects were arrested at residential addresses. A 4th Phoenix subject, the individual identified as the bulk acetyl fentanyl source operating through the Chinese chemical broker channel, was not at his registered address. He has not been located. As of the date of this account, that individual, listed in task force records as Subject 1, believed to be operating under at least 3 separate identity sets, remains a fugitive. The DEA has issued an international diffusion notice. The Chinese chemical broker entity associated with Subject 1's procurement chain has not cooperated with any investigative requests. Foss himself was arrested at his Bearden office at 3:04 a.m. He was awake when agents entered. Delaney's report notes that Foss made no statement, asked for counsel immediately, and was cooperative with the physical arrest process. He had been awake. There is no indication in any record of what tipped him off in those final hours, or whether he knew the operation was coming. What agents found on his desk: a printed signal conversation log, partially shredded, a burner phone with the SIM removed, and an open laptop displaying a one-way flight search. Departure Knoxville, destination Panama City, Panama. Departure time, 6:45 a.m., April 8th. He was arrested at 3:04 a.m. He had been 3 hours and 41 minutes from the airport. By the morning of April 9th, the following had been seized or frozen: 2 million counterfeit M30 tablets, 60 kilograms of acetyl fentanyl powder, 6 hydraulic pill press assemblies, $880,000 in cash, $2. 7 million in cryptocurrency, 6 vehicles, and the physical assets of 4 Vapor Ridge retail locations. The Precision Detail franchise locations in Tennessee and northern Georgia were placed under receivership pending asset forfeiture proceedings. Federal prosecutors filed a 47-count indictment in the Eastern District of Tennessee covering all 28 defendants. Charges included conspiracy to manufacture and distribute a controlled substance, money laundering conspiracy, use of a communication facility in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, and maintaining a drug-involved premises. Foss faces charges that include a leadership enhancement under federal sentencing guidelines, a designation carrying a potential sentence enhancement of 4 additional offense levels, Sentencing proceedings are ongoing as of this account. 3 defendants have entered cooperation agreements with prosecutors and are providing information regarding distribution contacts in the college town markets. That information is being used in a downstream investigation that has not yet resulted in arrests. The $880,000 in cash seized from the Columbia floor safe is accounted for. The cryptocurrency wallets are frozen. But Pruitt's estimated production numbers, cross-referenced against the tablet seizure totals and the raw material supply chain records, suggest the network had already distributed approximately 61 million tablets over its 18-month operational run before Operation Prest shut it down. 61 million tablets. The seizure recovered 2 million. The rest moved through the college town courier network and into whatever hands came after. The overdose data from Raleigh, Greenville, Knoxville, and Savannah, the same cities where Dr. Nair matched the dye signatures in December 2025, shows confirmed fentanyl fatalities attributable to counterfeit M30S throughout 2025. The exact number of those deaths traceable to Clearline's product cannot be determined from existing evidence. Prosecutors have not filed any charges directly linking the network's output to specific overdose deaths. The indictment focuses on distribution conspiracy, not homicide by distribution. Subject 1. The Phoenix supplier tier's upstream source is still out there. The Chinese chemical broker channel that supplied the acetyl fentanyl powder is still operational. The demand that made 2 million tablets per month financially viable in a 6-state market of college towns has not changed. Would the same operation be possible to build again from the same template with the same retail cover strategy? The Vapor Ridge model, functional retail, rotating press schedules, courier network through rental cars, worked for 18 months without triggering a direct investigation. It was found because a forensic chemist noticed a dye signature match in a routine sample comparison. Comment yes or no. Could a rebuilt version of this network operate for another 18 months before the same detection method caught it again? If you want to know how a similar operation moved its product through a different logistics model, offshore, maritime, container-based, the next video covers a case that took 4 agencies and 2 Coast Guard cutters to untangle. The network is dismantled. The infrastructure is seized. Subject 1 is still moving.